The brutal world. Zara opened her eyes as the harsh sun rose above the rocky hills of planet Kara. Every day began the same, filled with fear and danger. On Kara, survival wasn't promised. It was earned through strength, cunning, and luck. Zara stood carefully, her bright blue skin shining under the morning sunlight. She had learned long ago to move quietly and carefully. Every sound could attract deadly creatures. She lived alone, away from the tribes, in a small cave hidden between tall rocks. Zara didn't trust anyone. Trust was a weakness, and weaknesses got people killed. Her mother taught her that lesson before losing her own life to a predator. She stepped out of her cave slowly, scanning the area for danger. Her large, amber eyes checked every shadow, every movement. Everything looked quiet. But quiet didn't mean safe. Zara began her morning search for food. Her planet was dry and rocky, with very few plants. Every bite of food required courage. Predators hunted constantly. Zara remembered being chased many times, escaping death by seconds. She stopped at a dry, thorny bush. Carefully, she picked some dark berries. They were bitter but kept her alive. As she filled her small bag, a loud, scary roar came from behind the hills. Zara's heart raced. She froze completely, listening closely. The roar came again, louder, closer. Quickly, Zara hid behind a large rock. Her breathing slowed as she saw the creature, huge, black, and covered in thick spikes, walking slowly past her hiding place. It was a Gorath, one of the most dangerous beasts on Kara. She knew any wrong move meant instant death. She stayed still, barely breathing, until the Gorath disappeared into the distance. Zara sighed softly with relief, her body shaking from fear. This was life every day. Never safe, never easy. She moved carefully toward a distant stream to fill her water pouch. Clean water was rare, and each visit to the stream was a risk. Dangerous animals often hid there, waiting patiently for their prey. When Zara reached the stream, she saw others from a nearby tribe. She hid, watching quietly. They were aggressive and often attacked anyone outside their group. She couldn't risk being spotted. One of them, tall and muscular, sniffed the air suspiciously. Zara froze again. She knew how strong their senses were. She waited, heart pounding, hoping the wind wouldn't carry her scent toward them. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, they moved away. Zara rushed to the water quickly, filling her pouch as fast as possible, eyes alert the whole time. Once done, she ran quietly back toward her cave. On the way back, Zara saw something bright flash across the sky. She stopped suddenly, looking up with confusion. It was falling fast, leaving a trail of smoke behind it. The object crashed loudly nearby, shaking the ground beneath her feet. Zara was both scared and curious. Things rarely fell from the sky on Kara. What could it be? Slowly, carefully, she moved toward the crash site. Smoke rose from behind rocks. Zara's fear battled with curiosity. She had never seen anything like this before. She had to find out. She reached the spot and saw something incredible, a strange ship made of shiny metal, now lying broken on the ground. Zara had never seen technology like this. Her eyes widened in wonder. She stepped closer, noticing movement inside. She stopped quickly, hiding behind a rock. Was someone alive in there? The door opened slowly, and a creature fell out onto the rocky ground. Zara stared in shock. She had never seen anything like it before. The creature had pale skin, dark hair, and was wearing strange clothing. It looked weak, injured, and vulnerable. She stepped slightly closer, watching carefully. It looked helpless, not dangerous at all. Zara's mind filled with questions. Where did it come from? Why was it here? She saw blood dripping from its forehead. Suddenly, compassion she didn't know she had filled her heart. It looked scared, alone, just like her. Zara battled within herself. Her mind told her to leave. Helping was dangerous. Kindness was weakness. But something in the creature's face stopped her. She saw pain, fear, but also something different, something gentle and kind, even in suffering. Finally, Zara took a deep breath. Slowly, carefully, she walked toward the injured creature. Her hand trembled as she reached out gently to touch its shoulder. At her touch, the creature opened its eyes. Zara jumped back, ready to run. But its eyes were calm, friendly, and filled with a kindness she had never experienced on Kara. The creature tried to speak, weakly saying something she couldn't understand. Zara stared into the gentle eyes, feeling emotions she didn't know existed. For the first time, her brutal world felt different. The real danger was clear, but something else was there too. Hope. Maybe, Zara thought, there was something more than just surviving. Maybe this creature from another world could teach her something different, something beautiful. She didn't know it yet, but her brutal world was about to change forever. First encounter. Zara stood frozen, staring down at the strange creature from the fallen ship. Her heart pounded rapidly, fear still tight in her chest. She knew she should run, but something kept her there, something in the creature's gentle, friendly eyes. The creature tried to sit up, groaning in pain. Zara watched carefully, unsure what to do next. This strange being, the human, was unlike anything she'd ever seen. It had pale skin, short black hair, and wore odd clothes, torn and dirty from the crash. Zara stepped closer again, curiosity overpowering her fear. "Can you understand me?" she asked softly, her voice shaking slightly. The human blinked, focusing its eyes on Zara. Suddenly, it smiled weakly. "Yes," it said softly, its voice deep yet gentle. "I have a translator in my ear." Zara tilted her head, confused. Translator. She had never heard that word before. "My name is Jack," the human said slowly, placing a hand on his wounded head. "Thank you for not leaving me here." "Zara," she replied quietly. Her bright amber eyes studied Jack closely. "Where do you come from?" "Earth," Jack answered with a gentle smile, his voice calm despite his obvious pain. "Very far away." Zara felt excitement grow inside her. Earth sounded magical, strange, and wonderful. She'd never imagined a place beyond the brutal reality of Kara. But fear quickly returned, warning her of danger. "Can you walk?" Zara asked nervously, glancing around. "It's not safe here." Jack tried standing, struggling at first, but finally managing with Zara's help. Zara felt the warmth of Jack's hand, a kindness she'd never experienced before. Her heart raced again, but this time not from fear. "We must hurry," she whispered, guiding Jack toward her hidden cave. "There are many dangerous creatures here." Jack nodded, limping slowly alongside Zara. She noticed how brave he was, calmly following despite the pain and confusion. Zara's mind filled with questions about humans and Earth, but survival was the first priority. Finally, after a tense, careful walk, they'd reached Zara's cave hidden among tall rocks. She quickly moved some branches covering the entrance and gestured for Jack to enter first. Inside was dark, small, and simple, but safe. Jack sat heavily against the cave wall, breathing deeply. Zara quickly grabbed water from her pouch and offered it to him. Jack drank gratefully, signing in relief. "Thank you," he said warmly, looking at Zara with gratitude. "You're very kind." Zara froze again, startled by Jack's words. Kindness? On Kara, kindness was dangerous. Yet hearing Jack's gentle voice praising her filled Zara with warmth. "Rest here," she said softly, trying not to show her confusion. "I'll find something to help your wounds." As Zara moved around the cave, she quietly watched Jack from the corner of her eye. He seemed so calm, even peaceful, despite being stranded on such a harsh planet. It amazed Zara that Jack could smile, that he could feel gratitude even in such a brutal place. She found a special plant with healing properties she kept stored carefully. She crushed it gently into a paste, just as her mother had taught her long ago, remembering her mother's kind eyes and gentle hands, a rare softness in Zara's harsh memories. She returned to Jack's side, carefully applying the healing paste to his head injury. Jack closed his eyes, relaxing under Zora's gentle care. Zora felt her heart soften further. Trusting someone else felt strange, yet right. "Why did you come here, Jack?" Zora finally asked quietly. "This world isn't safe." Jack opened his eyes, meeting Zora's curious gaze. He smiled weakly again. "My people are explorers," he explained softly. "We travel across stars, searching for life and new friends." "Friends?" Zora asked, confused again. "What does friends mean?" Jack's eyes softened with sadness, realizing the harsh reality of Zora's life. "Friends help each other," Jack explained gently. "They care for one another, trust each other, and protect each other." Zora looked away, heart pounding. Friends sounded nice but impossible. Her entire life, she had been alone, surviving by herself. Could friendship truly exist in a place so cruel? "I don't think friendship can exist on Kara," Zora whispered sadly. Jack reached out slowly, gently placing his hand on Zora's shoulder. Zora jumped slightly, shocked by the comforting touch. No one had ever shown her comfort like that before. "Maybe that's why I'm here," Jack said softly. "To show you a different way." Zora stared into Jack's eyes, surprised to see real honesty and compassion. Her mind filled with wonder and doubt. Could humans truly be so different, so kind? Suddenly, a loud roar echoed from outside the cave, shaking Zora from her thoughts. Her eyes widened in fear. "Gorath," she whispered, voice trembling. "It followed us." Jack stood instantly, his face determined despite the pain. Zora reached for her sharp stone spear, prepared to fight for survival. "Stay here," Jack said firmly, stepping protectively toward the cave entrance. "I'll deal with this." Zora shook her head in panic. "No, it's too dangerous." Jack glanced back, his eyes calm but filled with determination. "On Earth, we protect our friends. Let me do this." Zora felt tears sting her eyes for the first time. Jack was risking his life for her, calling her a friend, even after just meeting. Her heart felt overwhelmed. Jack stepped outside slowly, courage radiating from him. Zora watched silently, her fear mixing with awe. This human was unlike anyone she'd ever known. Brave, compassionate, and willing to sacrifice himself. She stood behind him, ready to help, amazed at her own newfound bravery. Whatever happened next, she knew something deep inside her had changed forever. Zora realized that the human named Jack had begun teaching her the most important lesson of all. There was more to life than survival. Maybe friendship, compassion, and courage were stronger than brutality. Maybe, Zora hoped deeply, Jack could teach her how to truly live. And as the Gorath's roar echoed again, she knew her life had changed forever. The courage of humans. Zora held her breath as Jack stepped out of the cave, facing the Gorath alone. The monstrous creature was massive, its thick black hide covered in jagged spikes, its deep red eyes locked onto Jack, sensing him as prey. Zora clutched her spear tightly, her fingers trembling. She had seen Goraths tear apart creatures twice Jack's size. He had no chance, and yet there he stood, calm, fearless. The Gorath let out a deep, earth-shaking growl, lowering its head, ready to charge. Zora's instincts screamed at her to run, to leave Jack behind, but something inside her refused to move. Jack slowly lifted his arm, holding a small metallic device. He pressed a button, and suddenly, a loud, piercing noise filled the air. The Gorath recoiled, shaking its head violently, disoriented by the sound. Zora's eyes widened in shock. Jack was using technology she had never seen before. The Gorath roared in frustration, swinging its massive tail. Jack barely dodged, rolling across the ground with surprising agility for someone injured. He landed on one knee, quickly pulling a second device from his belt, a small cylindrical object. Jack pressed a button, and with a crackling sound, blue energy surged from the device, forming a short but powerful blade of light. Zora's jaw dropped. She had never seen anything like it. The Goreth charge, its massive jaws open wide, ready to crush Jack in a single bite. But at the last second, Jack leaped to the side, slashing his glowing weapon across the beast's face. The Goreth howled in pain, stumbling back as blue energy crackled against its thick hide. Jack didn't waste a second. He moved swiftly, striking again, this time hitting the beast's front leg. Zara couldn't believe what she was seeing. No one had ever stood against a Goreth like this, not without an army. Jack wasn't the strongest. He wasn't the biggest, but he was different. He fought with skill, intelligence, and something even more powerful: courage. The Goreth let out a final furious growl before turning and limping away, defeated. Jack exhaled, watching as the massive creature disappeared into the rocky landscape. Silence fell. The only sound was Zora's rapid breathing. She felt frozen in place, her mind struggling to understand what had just happened. Jack turned, his face calm but covered in sweat. He looked at Zora and smiled. "Well," he said, his voice light despite the tension. "That was fun." Zora's grip loosened on her spear. She stepped forward slowly, eyes wide with disbelief. You fought it," she whispered. Jack chuckled, wiping dirt from his face. "I'd rather avoid fighting, but sometimes you don't have a choice." Zora stared at him, stunned. She had spent her entire life running, hiding, barely surviving. And here was Jack, a stranger from another world, facing danger without hesitation. For the first time, she questioned everything she knew about survival. Jack winced slightly, touching his injured head. Zora immediately moved closer, surprising even herself. "You need to rest," she said firmly, taking his arm. "Come inside." Jack didn't argue. As they stepped back into the cave, Zora felt her heart pounding, not from fear, but from something else: admiration. Lessons from a human. For the next few days, Jack recovered inside Zora's cave. She watched him closely, observing everything he did. Jack wasn't like anyone she had ever known. Even in pain, he remained calm. He didn't complain, didn't panic. Instead, he smiled, told stories, and made jokes. Zora didn't understand. Her entire life, she had believed that strength meant fearlessness and aggression. But Jack was different. He wasn't afraid to show weakness, and yet he was stronger than anyone she had ever met. One night, as Jack sat by a small fire, he noticed Zora staring at him. "What's on your mind?" he asked. Zora hesitated. She didn't usually ask questions, but this time she couldn't stop herself. "You weren't afraid of the Goreth," she finally said. Jack raised an eyebrow. "Oh, I was definitely afraid." Zora frowned. "Then why did you fight?" Jack's face grew serious. He looked at the fire for a moment before answering. "There's a difference between fear and cowardice," he said. "Fear is natural. It keeps you alert. But cowardice is when you let fear control you." Zora stared, absorbing his words. "I've learned that courage isn't the absence of fear," Jack continued. "It's facing fear, even when everything inside you screams to run." Zora felt something shift inside her. Her entire life, she had been running from creatures, from people, from anything that threatened her survival. But Jack stood. Zora wanted to understand more. "Where did you learn that?" she asked. Jack smiled, his eyes reflecting the fire's glow. "From my people, humans." Zora tilted her head. "All humans are like you." Jack chuckled. "Not all, but many. Humans are stubborn. We don't like giving up." Zora thought about her own kind. The endless struggles, the brutal way they treated one another. The idea of a species that fought together, instead of against each other, felt impossible. "On my world," she said slowly, "kindness is weakness." Jack shook his head. "Kindness is strength." Zora looked at him, truly looked at him. For the first time, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, her world had been wrong all along. A test of trust. The next morning, Zara and Jack ventured outside the cave. Jack insisted on seeing more of Kara, despite his injuries. "I need to understand this place," he said, "if I'm going to survive here." Zara led him carefully through the rocky landscape, warning him about dangerous creatures. But Jack didn't just listen. He observed. He studied tracks on the ground, tested the wind, and even noted small details Zara had never noticed. "You see more than most," Zara admitted. Jack grinned. "That's how humans survive. We learn." But their peaceful exploration didn't last long. As they approached a small ridge, Zara suddenly froze. In the distance, her people were approaching. Zara's heart raced. "My tribe," she whispered. Jack's smile faded. "Are they friendly?" Zara swallowed hard. "No." Jack tensed but didn't move. He waited, letting Zara decide what to do. For the first time in her life, Zara didn't want to run. She turned to Jack. "We have to go," she said, grabbing his arm. Jack followed her without question. As they disappeared into the rocky shadows, Zara realized something. She was no longer just surviving. She was fighting for something more. And it was all because of the human who refused to run. Unexpected danger. Zara's heart pounded in her chest as she led Jack through the jagged rocks, away from the approaching figures of her people. Her mind raced. They had seen the smoke from Jack's crashed ship. They were searching. If they found Jack, they wouldn't hesitate. Humans were unknown. Unknown meant dangerous. Dangerous things were killed. She tightened her grip on Jack's wrist, pulling him forward. Jack followed her lead without question, moving quickly despite his injuries. He didn't ask why they were running. He understood. They weaved through narrow rock passages, stepping lightly to avoid loose gravel that could give them away. Zara knew these paths well. She had used them for years to escape predators and rival tribes. But this time, it wasn't a wild beast chasing her. It was her own kind. Zara finally stopped behind a large, jagged rock formation. She pressed her back against the rough stone, breathing hard. Jack crouched beside her, his breath steady, his dark eyes scanning the area. "They're getting closer," Jack whispered. Zara nodded. Her sharp ears picked up the sounds of movement, several feet crunching against loose rock, voices murmuring in a low, rough language. They were searching carefully, methodically. "They'll find us if we stay here," Jack said quietly. He wasn't panicked, just calm and assessing. Zara admired that about him. His ability to stay level-headed even in the face of danger. But she knew the truth. If they were caught, Jack would not survive. Zara had seen it before. Strangers, outsiders, never lasted long. They were either killed, enslaved, or left to die in the wild. The tribes did not welcome weakness, and kindness was as foreign to them as Jack was to this planet. Zara clenched her jaw. Jack wasn't weak. He had faced the Gorath alone. He had saved her. And now she had to do the same. She looked around quickly, scanning for an escape. The rock formations provided some cover, but they wouldn't last long. The best option was to get higher. Zara pointed up toward a narrow ledge above them. "We climb." Jack glanced at the ledge and gave a small nod. No hesitation. No arguing. He simply trusted her. Zara was used to surviving alone. She wasn't used to someone trusting her. Silently, she climbed first, her fingers gripping the rough stone. Her muscles burned with effort, but she moved quickly, reaching the top within seconds. Jack followed, slower because of his injuries, but still strong. As they reached the top, they flattened against the rock, holding their breath. Below, the voices grew louder. Shadows moved across the ground as the tribe members passed directly beneath them. Zara's body tensed. She could see their weapons, sharp, jagged spears tipped with poison. These were warriors, not hunters. They weren't looking for food. They were hunting Jack. One of them stopped, sniffing the air. Zara recognized him instantly. Vorkin, the tribe's strongest warrior. He was a brute, towering over the others, his skin marked with the scars of past battles. He held a massive blade, jagged and cruel. "She is near," Vorkin growled. His deep voice sent a shiver down Zora's spine. Zora's hands tightened into fists. Vorkin had always hated her, called her weak for living alone, for avoiding fights. He wanted control over everything. If he found Jack, he wouldn't just kill him. He'd make an example of him. Jack stayed completely still beside her. Even though he likely couldn't understand the language, he sensed the danger. Zora's mind raced. They couldn't stay here forever. If they waited too long, they'd be trapped. They had to keep moving. She leaned toward Jack and whispered, "Follow me." Jack nodded once. Zora led him across the narrow ledge, moving slowly to avoid loose stones that could fall and alert the warriors below. The path was tight, forcing them to move single file, but it was the only way forward. Step by step, they moved along the edge, their bodies pressed against the rock. Every second felt like an eternity. Then, it happened. A small rock slipped from beneath Jack's boot and tumbled downward. The sound echoed through the canyon. Zora's heart stopped. The warriors below froze. "There!" Vorkin roared. Zora grabbed Jack's arm and ran. A fight for survival. The moment they sprinted forward, the warriors unleashed their spears. Deadly projectiles sliced through the air, embedding themselves in the rock just inches behind them. Zora led Jack into a narrow pass between the cliffs, moving as fast as she could. Her lungs burned, her legs ached, but she could not stop. Jack was keeping up, but she could hear his ragged breathing. His injuries were slowing him down. "We need cover," Jack shouted. Zora knew just the place. She veered left, toward a dark cave entrance. It was dangerous, unknown, but safer than the alternative. The moment they dived inside, the world went dark. Heavy breathing filled the space. Outside, the warriors' voices shouted in frustration. "They're searching the caves," Jack whispered. Zora bit her lip. If they entered, it was over. There was only one way out. Jack turned to her, eyes determined. "We make a stand." Zora's breath caught. "You're injured." Jack smirked. "I'm still breathing." Zora's mind screamed against it. Fighting was suicide. But looking at Jack, she realized he wasn't like anyone else. He didn't fight because he wanted to. He fought because he had no choice. She took a deep breath. If Jack was willing to fight for his life, then so was she. She handed him a spare blade, small but sharp. "Stay close." Jack nodded. They waited. Footsteps echoed. Zora's grip tightened. Then, Vorkin entered. His massive frame blocked the cave's entrance. His cold eyes locked onto Jack, filled with amusement. "So this is the weak creature you protect," Vorkin sneered. "A fragile thing. A mistake." Zora stepped forward, standing between Jack and Vorkin. "He's not weak," she said firmly. Vorkin laughed. "Then let him prove it." Jack didn't hesitate. He stepped beside Zora, raising the blade she had given him. Zora felt her chest tighten. Jack was willing to fight for his life. But more than that, he was willing to fight for her. Vorkin grinned, raising his massive weapon. And then, he charged. The human spirit. The moment Vorkin charged, Zora's instincts screamed at her to move. The brute warrior swung his massive jagged blade with terrifying force, the sharp edge slicing through the air where Jack had been standing just moments ago. Jack had dodged, barely. He wasn't fast enough to fully escape. The tip of the weapon nicked his side, tearing his shirt and leaving a shallow cut. But instead of crying out in pain or stumbling, Jack did something that stunned Zora. He smiled. It wasn't arrogance. It wasn't madness. It was something else. A quiet, unshakable confidence. "That all you got?" Jack said, breathing hard. Vorkin snarled, taken aback by the human's lack of fear. "You are nothing but soft flesh. You will die." Jack wiped blood from his side and gave a small shrug. Maybe, but not today. Zara felt something she had never felt before. Not fear, not anger. It was pride. Jack was not like her people. He didn't fight for dominance, for blood, for power. He fought because he refused to give up. And something about that made her want to fight too. Vorkin lunged again, swinging his weapon with brute strength. This time, Zora moved. She darted forward, her spear spinning in her hands, and struck the flat side of Vorkin's blade, throwing his aim off just enough for Jack to dodge again. Jack didn't waste the opening. He ducked low and rammed his shoulder into Vorkin's side, knocking the larger warrior off balance. It was a move of strategy, not strength, using Vorkin's own weight against him. Vorkin stumbled back, roaring in frustration. "You think you can fight like one of us?" His eyes locked onto Jack with renewed fury. "You are weak." Jack wiped sweat from his forehead. "Then why haven't you won yet?" Zara saw the anger flash in Vorkin's face, and for the first time, she saw something else in his eyes. Doubt. Jack was changing the rules of the fight. Her people believed strength was everything. That to be strong meant to be brutal, merciless, and without kindness. But Jack was none of those things, and yet he was still standing. And that was strength. Zara felt something inside her shift. This was the moment. She had to make a choice. Would she continue to follow the brutal ways of her people, or would she stand with Jack, with this strange human who saw strength in kindness, in resilience, in never giving up? The answer came faster than she expected. She stepped forward, standing beside Jack. "You are wrong, Vorkin," she said, her voice steady. "Strength is more than brutality." Vorkin growled. "You defend this outsider. You betray your own kind." Zara lifted her spear, her eyes burning with newfound determination. "No, I am fighting for something bigger than fear." Jack grinned, shifting into a defensive stance. "Yeah, what she said. A battle of wills." Vorkin roared, charging again. But this time, Zara and Jack moved together. Jack dodged low, while Zara struck high, using her agility to outmaneuver Vorkin's brute force. She feinted left, making him shift his balance, just enough for Jack to land a solid punch to his ribs. Vorkin grunted, staggering back. His eyes blazed with fury, but Zara saw it again. Doubt. Jack grinned, breathing hard. "Not so easy when your opponent thinks, huh?" Zara smirked, realizing something. Jack was teaching her how to fight differently. How to use speed, intelligence, and adaptability instead of just brute strength. And for the first time, she wasn't just surviving. She was winning. Vorkin let out a frustrated growl and raised his blade for a final, desperate attack. But before he could bring it down, Zara struck first. She slammed the butt of her spear against his wrist, sending his weapon clattering to the ground. Jack followed up instantly, landing a hard kick to Vorkin's chest, knocking him flat onto his back. The mighty warrior fell, defeated. A hush fell over the cave. Zara stood over Vorkin, breathing heavily, her spear in hand. Jack stood beside her, wiping blood from his lip. Vorkin's chest rose and fell rapidly, his eyes wide with disbelief. He had never lost before. Zara looked down at him, her expression unreadable. Then she did something that shocked everyone. She held out her hand. Vorkin stared, confused. "You offer me mercy." Zara's voice was steady. "Mercy is not weakness." Vorkin hesitated. Then, slowly, he took her hand and pulled himself up. Zara had defeated him, but not with brutality, not with cruelty. She had won by being different. She had won by being like Jack, the human spirit. Outside, the other warriors had gathered, watching in stunned silence. They had expected a fight to the death, but instead they had seen something new. Zara turned to them, her voice carrying strength. "This human is not weak. He is stronger than any of us because he refuses to break." Jack raised an eyebrow. "I appreciate the speech, But I really hope they don't want to fight me next." Zora smirked. "They won't." Vorkin looked at Jack, his expression unreadable. Then, to everyone's surprise, he let out a deep chuckle. "You fight strangely, human," he admitted, "but you fight well." Jack exhaled. "I'll take that as a compliment." A shift happened in that moment, one that could not be undone. Zora's people had seen something new. A different kind of strength, a strength not built on fear, but on resilience, intelligence, and trust. Jack had not only survived, he had changed something in them, and in Zora most of all. A choice for the future. That night, as the fires burned in the village, Zora sat beside Jack, watching the stars. "You changed something today," she said quietly. Jack shrugged. "I just did what humans do." Zora turned to him, her golden eyes thoughtful. "Then maybe the universe needs more humans." Jack smirked. "Careful, I might take that as an invitation." Zora smiled softly. She had never felt this before. Hope. Maybe Kara didn't have to be brutal forever. Maybe, just maybe, Jack was only the beginning. Allies and friendship. The fires burned low in the village as the stars twinkled overhead, casting silver light upon the rocky terrain of Kara. Zora sat at the edge of the gathering, her mind still processing everything that had happened. Jack was alive. Vorkin had accepted defeat and mercy, and something had changed in the tribe. For the first time, Zora saw uncertainty in their eyes. The belief that brutality was the only way had cracked, like fragile stone under pressure. Jack sat beside her, his arms resting on his knees, his wounds mostly treated with the herbs Zora had given him. He gazed up at the stars, a small, content smile on his face. "You're thinking about home," Zora guessed. Jack chuckled. "Yeah, but, for the first time, I'm also thinking about this place, about what happens next." Zora frowned. "What do you mean?" Jack turned to her, his expression serious but warm. "You changed something today, Zora. You stood against your own people, not to destroy them, but to show them a different way." He exhaled. "That takes more strength than any fight." Zora looked away, unsettled. "I don't know if they truly believe it yet." Jack smiled. "They will. Give it time." Zora wasn't so sure. Change on Kara didn't come easily. It was a world built on fear, on the strongest surviving at the expense of the weak. Could one fight really shift generations of belief? Could one human make such a difference? She wasn't sure, but she hoped. A new dawn. The next morning, the village was buzzing with quiet whispers. Jack had become the center of attention, but not in the way Zora had feared. The warriors watched him, but they didn't attack. They observed. Jack, in typical human fashion, didn't seem to mind. He walked around the village, studying everything with interest. He asked questions, and when he didn't understand something, he laughed instead of becoming frustrated. Zora had never seen anyone act like that. Most beings who entered this village did so in chains. Jack moved like he belonged. Some of the younger warriors approached him cautiously. "You fought well," one of them muttered. It wasn't quite praise, but it also wasn't an insult. Jack grinned. "Thanks. You fight like angry rhinos." The warrior blinked, confused. "What's a rhino?" Jack chuckled. "Oh man, you guys are missing out." Zora watched, stunned. Jack had been nearly killed yesterday. And yet here he was, making jokes, making conversation, treating them like people instead of enemies. No one did that. No one spoke like that. And they listened. They didn't push him away. They listened. That realization sent a deep shiver through her. Jack was proving something powerful. That strength wasn't just about survival. It was about connection. And for the first time, Zora wondered, could Kara be more than what it had always been? Jack's offer. As the day went on, Jack gathered materials from the wreckage of his ship. The tribe didn't stop him. Some even helped, curious about the strange human technology. Zora knelt beside him as he fiddled with a small device, his fingers moving quickly. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Trying to boost my distress signal," Jack said. "If any human ship is nearby, they'll pick it up." Zara's stomach twisted. She hadn't thought about that. Jack was leaving. Of course, he was leaving. He didn't belong here. He had friends, family, a life far beyond Kara's brutal surface. Zara swallowed down the strange, unfamiliar feeling building in her chest. She should be happy for him. He deserved to go home. And yet, "You could come with me," Jack said suddenly, not looking up from his work. Zara's heart stopped. She stared at him. "What?" Jack finally turned, his brown eyes serious. "Come with me. See what's out there. You don't have to stay here, Zara." Zara's mind raced. She had never even considered leaving Kara. This was her home, for better or worse. It was all she had ever known. But Jack was offering her something more. Something bigger than survival. Freedom. A chance to see the stars. Her people believed Kara was the center of the universe, that nowhere else could be stronger, harsher, more demanding. But Jack had seen other worlds. Jack had lived among them. And now he was offering that life to her. Zara felt fear creep into her heart. Not fear of leaving, fear of wanting to. She struggled for words. "I don't know if I can." Jack didn't pressure her. He simply nodded. "Think about it. You're stronger than you realize, Zara. You don't have to be trapped here." Trapped. She had never thought of it like that before. Was she trapped? Or was she just afraid of change? A leader's choice. That night, Zara stood at the edge of the village, watching the stars. Jack was right. She had spent her entire life surviving, but she had never lived. She glanced back at the village, at her people. They were watching Jack. They were listening. They were changing. And she realized something terrifying. She could be the one to lead them. Not through fear, not through brutality, but through strength of heart. She could teach them what Jack had taught her, that survival didn't have to mean cruelty. That strength wasn't measured by how much fear you could inspire, but how much hope you could create. She had always thought leaving Kara would mean abandoning her people. But maybe, just maybe, it was the only way to save them. The only way to break the cycle. The only way to prove that there was more beyond what they had always known. The decision. The next morning, Jack was ready. His distress signal was active. They had time. A few days, maybe a week before a human ship arrived. Zara stood beside him, her heart pounding. "I've made my choice," she said. Jack turned, waiting. Zara took a deep breath. "I'm coming with you," she said. "But I'll come back. My people need me." Jack smiled, proud. "Then let's make sure they have something worth coming back to." For the first time in her life, Zara felt something stronger than fear, stronger than doubt. She felt hope, and as the sun rose over the brutal world she had always known, she realized something else. Kara wasn't just her prison. It was the place where she had been forged, not by its cruelty, but by her ability to rise above it. And now she would rise even higher. Straight into the stars. Zara's new world. The first time Zara stepped onto a human spaceship, she expected fear. Instead, she felt wonder. The floors were smooth metal, cold under her fingertips. The walls hummed softly with power, alive in a way the rocks of Kara never could be. The air smelled different, not the dry, dusty scent of her brutal world, but something clean, controlled, safe. Jack led her through the brightly lit halls, his stride relaxed, confident, so human. Zara's heart pounded, her senses overwhelmed. She had never been anywhere like this. She had never imagined a place so advanced. "You okay?" Jack asked, glancing back. Zara blinked, realizing she had stopped walking, lost in the sheer impossibility of where she was. She swallowed hard. "It's a lot." Jack smiled. "Yeah, first time in space can do that to you." Zara exhaled. She wasn't just off Kara. She was in space. Her entire life, she had looked up at the sky and assumed the stars were too far, too unreachable. Now, she was among them. She followed Jack into a larger room, a control center. A massive viewing window stretched across the far wall, revealing the infinite blackness of space, speckled with distant stars. Zara's breath caught in her throat. She had seen the stars before, but never like this. Never so close. She stepped forward without thinking, pressing her hands against the cold glass. The stars didn't feel cruel out here. They didn't feel distant. They felt endless. She had spent her life believing Kara was all there was. Now she knew better. Jack leaned beside her, watching her reaction. Beautiful, isn't it? Zara nodded slowly. I never knew. She trailed off, searching for words that didn't exist. I never knew it was all so big. Jack chuckled. Yeah, it's kind of overwhelming at first. Zara turned to him. And Earth. Your home. Jack's face softened, even more beautiful. Zara felt something strange, a deep ache. For the first time, she understood what she had been missing. Not just survival. Life. A new beginning. Jack's people had welcomed her. She had expected fear, suspicion, maybe even hostility. Instead, they had treated her with curiosity, respect, and kindness. She had met scientists who wanted to understand her world, explorers who had seen more stars than she could count, soldiers who didn't fight for dominance, but for protection, for each other. It was strange. On Kara, strength had always been about taking, about crushing the weak. Here, strength was about building, creating, lifting others up instead of pushing them down. She watched humans laugh together, support each other, trust each other. She saw a different kind of survival. And for the first time, she thought, maybe she could belong here. But there was still a weight on her chest, because she couldn't stay forever. She had promised Jack she would return to Kara. And she meant it, because now she understood something. Kara had never been the problem. It was the way her people saw it, the way they believed strength meant cruelty, that survival meant isolation. But she had seen another way now, and she would bring it back with her. The return to Kara. The moment Zora's feet touched Kara's rough terrain again, she felt it. The heat, the dryness, the weight of the world she had always known. She had left as one person. She had returned as someone else. Jack walked beside her, silent but watchful. He had insisted on coming back with her, for support, for protection, for friendship. Zara was grateful. They approached the village slowly, and the moment they were seen, a ripple of whispers spread through the tribe. They had thought she was dead. And yet here she was, stronger, different, changed. Vorkon stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. You returned. Zara met his gaze without fear. Of course. He studied her, then glanced at Jack. And the human. Zara's fingers tightened into fists. She knew this was a test. If she showed weakness, they would turn on her. So she did the opposite. She stepped beside Jack, not in front of him, not behind him, beside him. He is my ally, she said firmly, and he has shown me things you cannot imagine. Vorkon's expression darkened. You left our world. You walked among them. Yes, Zara said, and I learned something. Silence. Zara let the weight of her words settle before continuing. Strength is not about fear, she said. It is not about crushing others. It is about standing together. It is about fighting for something bigger than just survival. Her words hung in the air, heavier than any weapon. The warriors shifted, uncertain. She had their attention, and she wasn't done. I have seen what lies beyond the stars, she said, voice steady. And I have seen what we could become if we let go of the past. Vorkon's jaw tightened. You think we are weak. Zara shook her head. I think we are lost. But we don't have to be. Another long silence. Then, finally, Vorkin did something she never expected. He laughed. It was a deep, rough sound, filled with something Zara couldn't quite place. "You've changed, Zara," he said. "And I don't know if I like it." Zara smirked. "I don't care if you do." Vorkin's expression shifted, something like respect flashing in his gaze. Then he stepped aside. And just like that, Zara had won. Not with blood, not with war, but with change. The legacy of a human. That night, as she and Jack sat beneath the familiar stars, Zara felt at peace. She had left one kind of world and returned to another. Jack nudged her. "You did it, you know." Zara raised an eyebrow. "Did what?" Jack grinned. "Started something new." Zara exhaled, looking up at the sky. Maybe she had. Maybe this was only the beginning. Because Kara was still a harsh world. It was still dangerous. But it was also changing. And for the first time, Zara knew. She was strong enough to change it. One lesson at a time. One battle at a time. One human at a time. And maybe, just maybe, one day, her people would join the stars too.